July 18, 1946. A 73-year-old black grandmother was lynched in broad daylight on a southern street while the town looked straight ahead. Before sunrise 9 hours later, 4 white women were dead, and Greenwood woke up unable to deny what had changed. When the law refuses to act, who enforces consequences, and why does everyone suddenly comply? Main Street at 2:15 p.m. looks ordinary in the way small towns often do. Sunlight washes the storefronts, reflecting off glass and pale concrete. Doors open and close. People move with purpose but without hurry, confident that nothing on this street is about to matter. The woman walking through it has learned how to keep herself small. She moves slowly, careful, with each step a grocery sack tucked against her side and a wooden cane steadying her weight. At 73, she has lived long enough to know where not to draw attention and how to pass through public spaces without leaving a trace. She is not a protester, not an agitator, not someone whose name appears in papers or meetings. Her life has been shaped by routine and restraint, by decades of rules that did not need to be explained to be understood. She has survived Jim Crow by doing what was required of her, keeping her head down, her voice soft, and her presence unchallenging. In towns like this, that is how people lived long lives. The contact is accidental. A slight misstep. A shoulder brushing fabric. The grocery sack tilts, and something inside cracks softly. It is the kind of moment that usually ends with a brief apology and a half smile forgotten as soon as it happens. She apologizes immediately. Her words come out practiced and quick, the tone respectful, deferential. She explains that she did not see the other woman, that her eyes are not what they used to be. She lowers her head as she speaks, a habit formed long before this afternoon. That should have closed the moment. Instead, the street stiffens. The other woman's response is sharp and loud, cutting through the background noise of the afternoon. She steps forward rather than back, her voice rising until people several storefronts away turn to look. "You touched me." The words are not about the contact. They are about boundaries, who is allowed to occupy space and who is not. The older woman apologizes again, this time more urgently. She says it was an accident. She asks to be forgiven. Her voice trembles not from guilt, but from recognition. People stop. Some glance over their shoulders. A few pause with curiosity. No one intervenes. 3 other women move closer, drawn by volume and certainty. They form a loose circle, closing off the sidewalk and creating a stage where there had been none. The moment shifts from private to public, from mistake to spectacle. The story begins to change as it's repeated. What was a bump becomes a grab. What was an apology becomes defiance. Each retelling grows louder, firmer, more confident than the last. A man standing near the doorway of a hardware store takes a step forward. He stops before committing to it. He understands the cost of being seen as interfering. He has learned the same rules she has. The first shove comes without warning. It is meant less to injure than to establish control. The second is harder. The cane slips from her hand and skids across the pavement, tapping once before coming to rest near the curb. The grocery sack tears. Bread rolls out. Milk spills across the concrete, white against gray. No one bends down to help. Voices overlap now. Someone talks about teaching a lesson. Someone else agrees, the words passing between them as if they were already decided. Hands take hold of the older woman's arms. She is not dragged yet, but she is guided firmly away from the open sidewalk and toward the narrow space between 2 buildings. Her feet struggle to keep pace. She looks once over her shoulder at Main Street. It looks exactly as it did moments earlier, sunlit, busy, and different. The doors are still open. The people are still watching. The alley is cooler shaded and quiet in a way the street never is. It is hidden from view, which has always made it useful. The sounds of the town fade quickly as the group moves deeper into the space. Later there will be disagreements about how long this took. Some will say it happened in minutes. Others will insist it stretched longer. Time in moments like this becomes unreliable. What is not disputed is that no uniform appears. No warning is given. No authority steps in to slow what is unfolding. Less than 30 minutes earlier, this had been an ordinary walk home. Now the street has decided that it belongs to someone else. The transformation does not come from rage alone. It comes from something more dangerous: confidence. The confidence that nothing will happen afterward. The confidence built by years of silence and absence of consequence. That confidence is what turns a brief, accidental contact into something final. And it is what allows an entire town to continue its afternoon believing, because it always has that what happens next will cost nothing at all. Times, locations, and exchanges are reconstructed from contemporaneous local records and later community accounts. The alley sits behind the bank like an afterthought, narrow-shaded and built for things that aren't meant to be seen. The air is cooler here, the light broken into thin strips by brick walls that rise too close together. Sound carries differently. A raised voice doesn't travel far. A sudden impact disappears quickly. 4 women close in on one. The first blow lands before the older woman fully understands where she's been taken. It is a slap-sharp, deliberate, meant to stun rather than injure. Her head snaps to the side. The groceries slip from her arm and hit the ground in pieces, bread rolling a bottle, breaking liquid, spreading across the concrete. The second strike is harder, then another. The rhythm changes from impulse to pattern. Voices rise, overlapping, feeding off one another. Orders are given. Insults are thrown. Each word lands with the confidence of someone who does not expect to be challenged. She tries to speak. The words don't come out right. Her mouth opens, closes. An apology forms again out of habit, out of muscle memory. It makes no difference. A shove sends her backward into the brick. Another follows. A foot catches her shin. She loses her balance and drops to one knee. The cane is gone. She reaches for it and finds only air. A man stands at the mouth of the alley, half hidden by shadow and distance. He had been in the back of the hardware store taking a break when the noise caught his attention. He knows immediately what he's seeing: an elderly black woman on the ground. 4 white women standing over her. He takes a step forward, then he stops. This is not hesitation. It is calculation. He understands the rules as clearly as he understands gravity. Stepping in would not stop the beating. It would expand it, pull him into it, and then beyond him to people who aren't even present. He says nothing. His hands hang at his sides. His jaw tightens. Later witnesses will describe the look on his face as something close to grief. The beating continues. The slaps turn to kicks. The kicks to something more chaotic, feet, hands, anything that connects. The woman on the ground curls inward, trying to protect what she can. Her breathing grows shallow, uneven. She is 73 years old. Her body does not recover the way it once did. Someone laughs. Someone tells her to stay down. Someone else says she needs to learn. The phrase "get the rope" is spoken almost casually, as if it were a practical step in a process already underway. It is not shouted. It is not debated. It lands in the alley and settles there. The man at the entrance looks away for a moment. When he looks back, one of the women is turned toward the hardware store. Inside, the request is blunt. Rope, 50 feet. No explanation is offered and none is requested. The store owner understands immediately what it's for. He hesitates just long enough for the decision to register, then hands it over. In 1946, refusing a request like that carried its own risks. The rope is dragged back into the alley, its fibers scraping softly against the ground. Someone begins shaping it, hands moving with a familiarity that suggests this is not the first time. The older woman sees it and tries to pull herself backward, leaving a faint smear on the concrete. No one stops. No one appears at the alley's edge to interrupt what has become inevitable. The street beyond continues its afternoon. Doors open, cars pass. Somewhere nearby, a register rings. Later, people will argue over responsibility, over who handed over the rope, over who could have intervened, over whether anyone truly had a choice. What is clear is this: every step of what follows depends on silence as much as it depends on force. Silence from witnesses. Silence from authority. Silence from a town that has learned what happens when the rules are challenged. The alley absorbs the sound and gives nothing back. It has done this before. It will do it again. And by the time anyone decides to look too closely, The decision has already been made. Some exchanges in this chapter are rendered from multiple contemporaneous accounts that align in substance if not in wording. The tree stands at the far end of the alley, older than the bank, older than most of the buildings around it. Its branches stretch wide enough to catch shade in the afternoon and strong enough to hold weight. People have passed it for years without thinking about it. Today it becomes useful. By the time the rope is ready, the alley has gone quiet. Not silent, just emptied of anything that might interrupt what comes next. The woman on the ground is barely able to lift her head. Her breathing is shallow, uneven, as if her body has already begun the work of withdrawing. Hands lift her. Not gently, not carefully. She has moved the short distance to the tree in steps that feel longer than they are. Her shoes scrape once against the concrete and then leave it. What follows takes less than 3 minutes. There is no ceremony, no speech, no hesitation. The rope tightens. Her body struggles briefly, then slows. The alley does not echo. Brick absorbs sound. Time continues its ordinary pace outside. 3 minutes is not long. It is enough. When it is over, the women step back and look at what they have done. One adjusts her dress. Another wipes her hands as if from dust. Someone says something about making an example. Someone else agrees. They do not run. They leave the body where it is and walk back toward Main Street, emerging from the alley into sunlight as if returning from an errand. The contrast is immediate noise movement commerce. A bell rings as a shop door opens. A car idles at the curb. They resume their afternoon. Inside a dress shop, bolts of fabric are discussed. Patterns are held up against the light. Purchases are made. Voices soften again, returning to the tone of routine. The alley is only a few steps away, but it may as well be another town. No one is arrested. No one is questioned. The absence is immediate and total. No patrol car appears. No siren cuts through the street. The people who saw the women return do not ask where they have been. They do not need to. In places like this, the line between public and private has always been carefully drawn. What happens out of sight stays there. What happens to people who are not meant to be protected does not become a problem. By late afternoon, the body is discovered. The response is minimal and procedural. There is no urgency in the handling, no visible shock in the faces of those who arrive. Paperwork replaces outrage. The alley is cleared. The message is delivered without words. Nothing will come of this. That message spreads faster than any official statement could. It moves through back rooms and kitchens, through glances and silences, through the knowledge people carry without ever writing down. For the town, the lesson is familiar. Violence, when properly directed, carries no cost. Order, when enforced this way, sustains itself. What no one on Main Street knows yet is that the alley does not mark the end of the story. It marks the point where the story leaves Greenwood. Somewhere far from this street, a telephone will ring. Names will be spoken. Time will be measured differently. But in this moment, Greenwood believes what it has always believed, that the rules have held, that authority has been preserved, that there will be no consequences beyond this afternoon. That belief is what allows the town to sleep. The law does not react because it does not need to. It has already communicated its position through inaction. And in the absence of response, another kind of response becomes possible. The first reaction will not come from a courthouse or a uniform. It will come from memory, from connection, from a network that does not recognize local boundaries. The alley, emptied, now returns to shadow. The tree stands unchanged, and the street above continues its business, unaware that the balance it relies on has just been disturbed. When a system refuses to respond, someone else always does. The only question is who and how quickly. No public record of a corresponding prosecution exists for this incident in the period immediately following. The witness waits until the alley empties. He does not move right away. He stands where he is, listening to the town return to itself, the bell on a shop door, a car pulling away from the curb, a voice calling from across the street. Normal sounds restored quickly as if nothing has happened. He understands what staying silent would mean. He also understands what speaking could cost. The first problem is the phone. There is no telephone in the alley. There is no phone in the hardware store where he works that he can use without being noticed. The call he needs to make cannot be overheard, cannot be traced back to him in the first minutes. In a place like this, information travels faster than people do. He walks 2 blocks to a small barbershop owned by a black family, the kind of place that keeps its windows clean and its conversations low. Inside, the radio hums softly. A man looks up from the chair, reads his face, and nods once without asking questions. The phone sits behind the counter. He waits until the door closes behind him. He lifts the receiver with care as if the sound alone could give him away. He asks for an operator. He gives a city name far away from Greenwood, far enough that it changes the stakes. The line clicks. Then it clicks again. He does not know the man he is calling personally. He knows of him the way people know of storms, by reputation, by consequence, by what happens when the name is spoken too loudly. He gives the operator another number, then another. Minutes stretch. He keeps his voice low. He does not pace. He does not look at the window. When the call finally connects, he speaks quickly, afraid the line might go dead or someone might walk in. He explains what happened. He keeps it tight. No emotion, no commentary, just facts. A woman dragged into an alley, a rope, a tree, the time of day. He gives names as carefully as he can remember them. 4 women. He lists them one by one. He adds what matters most in places like this, who they are married to. A deputy sheriff, a bank president, a school superintendent, a county clerk. He gives addresses. On the other end of the line, there is no interruption. No raised voice, no questions at first. Just breathing. The silence lasts long enough that he wonders if the call has dropped. He starts to repeat himself, then stops. When the voice finally comes back, it is calm and controlled. He is told to stay where he is, to make no more calls, to speak to no one else. He is told someone will contact him again within the hour. The line goes dead. He places the receiver back on the hook with a precision that surprises him. His hands are shaking now. The barber pretends not to notice. Outside, a car passes. Time keeps moving. The second call happens exactly when he is told it will. This time the voice is different, older, steadier. The questions are sharper. Addresses are repeated. Details are confirmed. The names are spoken again slowly, as if being written down. Then the witness hears something he does not expect. Nothing. No anger. No disbelief. No threats. Only silence longer than before. That silence is what unsettles him most. He has heard shouting before. He understands rage. Rage burns hot and then burns out. Silence does not. Silence calculates. Somewhere far north of Greenwood, a man listens without speaking. He does not interrupt. He does not ask for clarification. He does not need to. Each detail fits into a structure already familiar to him. When he finally speaks, it is not to argue the facts. He asks for the names again. They are given again. There is a pause. Paper moves, a pen scratches, then a sentence delivered evenly without emphasis. Before sunrise, no explanation follows. None is required. The witness does not know what will happen next. He only knows that the call has crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. Whatever protection silence once offered him has been replaced by something else: attention. When he hangs up this time, he stays seated for several minutes. The barber pours him a glass of water without being asked. Neither of them speaks. Outside, Greenwood finishes its day. Lights come on. Supper tables fill. Doors lock. The town believes the worst of the story is already over. It believes what it has always believed, that distance is safety and that power does not travel well. It is wrong. The most dangerous thing about the call is not what was said. It is what was understood without being spoken. Silence in the wrong hands is not mercy. It is instruction. The sequence and timing of calls are reconstructed from multiple indirect accounts that align on substance and outcome. The instruction is delivered without argument and without room for delay. 4 names, 1 deadline. 1 condition that matters more than speed or discretion: it has to be seen. There is no debate about jurisdiction, no discussion of obstacles, no weighing of alternatives. The list is short because the list is final. Names are repeated once slowly to ensure there is no confusion. The order does not matter. The result does. What follows is not anger. It is organization. The deadline is fixed to the sky. Before sunrise, not a date, not a range, a line drawn by light. Everyone on the call understands what that means. Time is no longer counted in hours, but in decisions that cannot be undone. The symbolism is chosen deliberately, not for cruelty, for clarity, trash bags, not graves, not messages written in ink. Not a quiet disappearance that could be denied or reinterpreted later. Trash bags are public, ordinary, impossible to misunderstand. They say one thing in any town in any language disposal. This is not about vengeance. It is about balance. Someone on the line starts to raise a practical concern: distance, travel time, the difficulty of assembling people quickly enough. The response comes before the sentence is finished. I don't need explanations, the voice says. I need results. The words land flat in calm. There is no volume behind them, no emphasis. They do not need it. The meaning is clear: solve the problem or become one. The call ends. The work begins immediately. Phones ring across a map that does not appear on any wall. Harlem connects to cities that never show up in headlines, to people whose names never appear in papers. Favors are called in. Old debts are acknowledged. Questions are not asked because questions waste time. What looks impossible to an outsider becomes manageable when broken down into pieces. Not a team from New York. That would take too long. Not strangers. That would introduce uncertainty. The solution is closer, faster, already in place. Within minutes, someone in the Carolinas answers a call he has been expecting for years. He listens. He does not interrupt. When the last detail is given, he says one word: understood. He knows the terrain. He knows the routes. He knows who can move without drawing attention and who cannot. More importantly, he knows what kind of job this is. This is not a warning shot. This is a correction. Cars are reassigned. Schedules are cleared. Men who were supposed to be somewhere else that night quietly cancel their plans. No one writes anything down. No one repeats the instructions aloud more than necessary. Every decision is made with the clock in mind. Traffic patterns, shift changes, dinner hours, porch lights, when houses go dark. The logic is simple: the fewer moving parts, the fewer mistakes. Speed comes from preparation, not recklessness. By the time the sun drops below the line of buildings in Greenwood, the pieces are already moving. Not toward the town, but around it, circling, observing, waiting for darkness to finish the work daylight began. What makes this possible is not money, though money helps. It is not fear, though fear plays a role. It is familiarity. Networks built over decades do not need to introduce themselves. They know where to apply pressure and where to avoid it. The question how an organization in Harlem can touch a southern town in a matter of hours has a simple answer. It doesn't move like a single body. It moves like a memory. Passed along, activated, acted upon without ceremony. Back in Greenwood, the town settles into its evening. Supper plates are cleared. Radios hum. Doors lock. The people who matter believe the worst part of the day has already passed. They are wrong. The order does not require confirmation. It does not require updates. It only requires completion. Sunrise is the only thing that counts. By the time the first stars appear, there is no longer any question about whether the deadline can be met. Only how cleanly. The instruction is already traveling faster than anyone expects. Not because it is loud, but because it is precise. And when something precise is released into a system that understands it, the result is never delayed. No recording exists of the directive. Its structure is reconstructed from converging accounts and the sequence of actions that followed. The second call goes through without hesitation. It reaches a man who understands immediately why the line is being used this way at this hour. He does not ask how the information was obtained. He does not ask who else knows. He listens, and when the last detail is delivered, he acknowledges the debt that has just been called in. Favors in this world are not emotional. They are accounted for tracked over years, sometimes decades. When they are collected cleanly. By nightfall, the problem has a new shape. It will not be solved by distance. It will be solved by proximity. The team assembles quietly without ceremony and without introductions. 4 men is enough. More would be wasteful. Less would invite error. Each has done this kind of work before, though, never for this reason and never on this clock. They are chosen for steadiness, not bravado. For patience, not speed. For the ability to follow instructions exactly as given and to stop when the work is finished. No one raises his voice. No one jokes. The tone is procedural. Maps are not unfolded. The town does not require them. Greenwood is small. Its patterns repeat themselves. People go home at the same time, sit in the same rooms, turn off the same lights. Observation begins before movement. They arrive on the edges of town while daylight still holds blending into traffic that does not expect to be studied. They park where they can watch without being noticed and wait for routine to take over. Dinner is served. Radios play, curtains shift. A porch light flicks on, then off. Another stays on longer than expected. Notes are taken mentally, not on paper. Each target is evaluated separately. Not as a person, but as a schedule. Who is home alone? Who has visitors? Who lives near a road that empties after dark? Which doors are used most often? Which windows stay open for air? Nothing is rushed. By the time darkness settles fully, the town has grown quieter but not alert. Greenwood believes the day has ended. It has no reason to think otherwise. The men move only when certainty replaces possibility. They do not travel together. They do not arrive at the same time. They do not repeat methods unnecessarily. Familiarity breeds mistakes. The work unfolds with discipline rather than force. Doors open when expected. Rooms are entered without noise. People are encountered in moments of comfort sitting, reading, listening, never looking for danger because they do not believe it exists. The efficiency is deliberate. The goal is not chaos. It is completion. Between houses, the men pause long enough to reassess the clock. Sunrise remains distant but visible in the mind. The deadline keeps decisions sharp. There is no improvisation. What allows this to happen is not superior planning. It is assumption. The assumption deeply held that certain people are untouchable. That assumption leaves doors unlocked longer than they should be, lights burning where shadows would be safer. By the time the last location is reached, the town is asleep in earnest. Streets empty, engines cool. Greenwood has fully surrendered to night. The men do not linger. They do not check their work beyond what is necessary. They move on as soon as each task is finished, fading back into routes that lead away from the town rather than through it. The question how a network in Harlem can reach a southern town without crossing 800 miles has answered itself. It never had to. The distance was closed by familiarity, by obligation, by people already in place long before the call was made. Power does not travel in straight lines. It waits. By the time the sky begins to lighten at the edges, the work is done. The town still sleeps unaware that its certainty has already been dismantled. Nothing about the night will feel loud when it is discovered. That is by design. The most effective messages are not delivered with noise. They are delivered with timing. Operational details reflect common post-war methods used in clandestine actions intended to leave no trace. The night does not announce itself. It settles the way it always does in Greenwood lights thinning out radios, going quiet doors, closing one by one. By the time the streets empty, the town believes the day has finished with it. The first house is approached without urgency. A car passes once, then not again. The men wait for the pattern to repeat, then move when it does. A back door opens the way it has every night before. Inside, the air smells of supper and furniture polish. Someone sits relaxed, unaware that routine has become vulnerability. There is no shouting, no struggle that carries beyond a room. The work is precise and brief. It ends almost as soon as it begins. They leave the house the same way they entered, quietly without disturbance, returning the street to exactly what it was. A porch light stays on. A clock continues to tick. The second house requires patience rather than speed. Someone else is present, asleep in another room, breathing heavy and slow. The men adjust, waiting for a moment that keeps the balance intact. They understand the difference between haste and efficiency. When they move, it is clean. No raised voices, no broken furniture, no reason for a neighbor to look out a window. This is not rage. It is procedure. Between locations, the men check nothing but the time. Sunrise remains hours away, but it no longer feels distant. The clock is no longer a threat. It is confirmation. The third house sits closer to the edge of town. Fewer lights nearby, a longer driveway. The woman inside has settled into the quiet of the evening, believing distance equals safety. It always has. The approach is adjusted to the setting, not the person. A door that creaks is avoided. A light that stays on too long is noted. The men move when certainty replaces chance. Again, the end comes quickly. There is no negotiation because there is nothing to negotiate. No warning because warnings invite noise. No prolonging because prolonging creates mistakes. The house returns to stillness as soon as it is left. The fourth house is the most complicated, not because of resistance, but because of awareness. Someone inside is accustomed to authority, to control, to the expectation that the night belongs to them. The men account for this. A distraction is created outside, small, controlled enough to pull attention away without inviting help. While eyes turn in the wrong direction, the work inside finishes before anyone understands what has happened. By the time the distraction ends, the house has already returned to silence. Across Greenwood, the night holds. No alarms sound. No neighbors gather. The town sleeps through the completion of something it does not yet understand. The men do not meet afterward. They do not compare notes. Each knows what the others have done because each has done the same thing. When the last task is finished, they separate along different routes, dissolving back into roads that lead away from the town rather than through it. What makes the night terrifying is not the violence. It is the absence of chaos. Nothing is overturned. Nothing burns. No one screams. Speed in this context is not about aggression. It is about certainty. The faster something ends, the fewer chances there are for it to become visible. By the time Greenwood's clocks roll toward morning, the work is already sealed by its own efficiency. There is nothing to chase, nothing to hear, nothing to interrupt. The town will wake believing it slept peacefully. That belief will last only until daylight touches Main Street. People often assume fear comes from spectacle, from noise, from confrontation, from disorder. They are wrong. The kind of fear that lingers is born from precision, from knowing that something decisive occurred without warning, without friction, without resistance. The question that will ripple through Greenwood by mid-morning will not be who did this. It will be how could this happen so quietly? Because when something can be done this quickly, it means it could be done again. And that is what settles deepest. The order and timing described here are estimates drawn from witness markers and later investigative reconstruction. The placement is exact. 4 heavy trash bags are set down on the sidewalk before dawn, positioned where the women had stood days earlier, close enough to the curb to be noticed, far enough from the storefront to be unavoidable. They are aligned, not dumped. No hurry shows in the way they rest against the concrete. It is quiet when the men leave. Greenwood is still asleep, holding on to the last minutes of night. By the time the first shop owner unlocks a door, the bags have already become part of the street. A passerby slows, then keeps walking. Garbage day is familiar. The shape does not yet register as wrong. What does register is the leak. A dark stain spreads beneath one bag, thin at first, then unmistakable. Someone stops. Someone else looks closer. A hand reaches for a phone. The call goes through quickly. A patrol car arrives without sirens. The officer steps out, glances at the bags, and pauses. He does not touch them right away. He looks up and down Main Street, measuring the distance between what he is seeing and what it implies. More cars follow. Tape appears. The sidewalk is cleared. The bags are opened one by one. Identification happens faster than expected. not because the work is rushed, but because there is no confusion. The names travel through the small crowd in whispers that do not need repetition. These are not strangers. These are women whose faces are known, whose families are known, whose presence on this street has always been assumed. The realization settles unevenly. Shock comes first, then calculation. People do not ask questions out loud. They exchange looks. They check who is standing near them. A few step back. No one moves forward. The message does not need explanation. It is not interpreted as a random act or a robbery or a dispute gone wrong. The sequence is too clean. The symmetry too precise. 4 bodies for 1. Placed where the town will see them. Left where denial is impossible. Phones ring across Greenwood. Not to reporters at first, but to relatives, to employers, to people who understand the value of early information. Doors close. Curtains move. Law enforcement works through the steps it is trained to follow: photographs, notes, calls up the chain. But the pace is different. There is caution where there should be urgency. Questions are asked softly. Answers are taken without pressure. Within hours, everyone who matters understands the outline, even if no one agrees to say it aloud. This is not a crime in search of motive. It is a response. By mid-morning, Main Street has returned to movement, but not to comfort. People pass the taped-off area with wider arcs than usual. Conversations stop when uniforms approach. The town has absorbed the warning and is adjusting accordingly. The fear does not come from the bodies. It comes from the speed. Something traveled here overnight, executed 4 separate acts, and left without friction. No pursuit followed, no interruption occurred. The implication is clear enough to change behavior on its own. Investigators talk about leads. They mention distance. They acknowledge the lack of witnesses. They note the professionalism without using the word. Paperwork grows thicker. Confidence does not. By afternoon, the story has moved beyond Greenwood, but Greenwood does not move with it. The town stays focused inward, measuring what it can control and what it cannot. People begin revising their assumptions about safety, about consequence, about who is protected and why. The bags are removed. The sidewalk is cleaned. The street looks normal again. But normal no longer means what it did the day before. What remains is the understanding that this was not meant to be hidden. It was meant to be seen. Not as spectacle, but as instruction. This was not an act of chaos. It was a notice. And notices like this do not require signatures. They require acknowledgement. Community reactions described here are synthesized from multiple contemporaneous accounts recorded the same morning. The federal agents arrive without ceremony. There are no sirens, no press conference, no announcement that justice is about to assert itself. A sedan pulls up near the station. 2 men step out with briefcases and neutral expressions. They ask for a room, a desk, and everything that's been collected so far. What they receive is thin. Photographs show what anyone can already see. Statements repeat the same gaps. Times are approximate. Movements are inferred. The scene offers nothing that points forward, only what has already happened. The agents walk the route anyway. They stand where the bags were placed. They note sightlines, distances, traffic patterns. They measure what could have been seen and what could not. They listen more than they speak. Witnesses answer questions carefully. Some offer nothing at all. Others say they were asleep. A few admit they noticed something was wrong, but only after the fact. Fear has a way of sanding down detail. No one contradicts anyone else. No one adds color. Stories align because they have been stripped of anything memorable. It is not obstruction, it is survival. The agents check phone records, nothing useful. They trace vehicles, nothing clean enough to follow. They ask about outsiders' unfamiliar faces, sudden movements in the night. Greenwood is small. Everyone looks familiar until they don't. The absence becomes its own finding. By the second day, the questions change. They become quieter, less formal. A conversation happens after hours off the clock, without notebooks or official titles. It takes place in a room where doors stay closed. The message is not delivered as a warning. It is offered as advice. Digging deeper, they explain, would require resources and time. It would also require cooperation that does not exist. People who know things are not prepared to say them. People who could say them have already decided not to. There are risks in pushing further. Not legal risks, personal ones. The agents do not name those risks. They do not need to. The implication hangs in the room heavy and unspoken. Everyone present understands what has been demonstrated. 4 separate acts carried out in a single night. No witnesses willing to testify. No mistakes left behind. No traceable path back to a planner. This is not amateur work. The recommendation that follows is practical rather than moral. Mark the case unsolved. Preserve the files. Step back. It is not surrender. It is triage. The agents leave the way they came quietly without comment. No charges are filed. No suspects are named. The paperwork is complete enough to satisfy procedure and empty enough to close the door. Greenwood notices immediately. The town reads the absence as clearly as it read the bags on the sidewalk. The conclusion does not need to be stated. It spreads through posture and tone, through the way people stop talking when a car passes through the way doors lock earlier than they used to. Authority has made its calculation. What matters now is not who did this, but what happens next. And the answer for Greenwood is nothing. Nothing public. Nothing official. Nothing that would invite repetition. The street adjusts. Behavior changes without instruction. People avoid certain topics. Certain names stop being spoken aloud. The town learns where its boundaries are by feeling where the pressure no longer comes. The file remains open in theory. In practice, it is sealed by the same force that opened it understanding. When institutions choose silence, they do not erase power. They acknowledge it. The law has decided where it stands by stepping aside. In doing so, it confirms that someone else has already drawn the lines that matter. That someone does not issue statements. He does not need to. The evidence of his reach has already been absorbed into the town's daily calculations. What Greenwood learned that week is not written in any report. It exists in memory, in caution, in the quiet recalibration of what is safe to do and what is not. And once a town learns that lesson, it does not need to be taught again. Recommendations to close the case reflect common field judgments made under conditions of limited evidence and elevated risk, not a formal legal determination. There was no trial for what happened in that alley. No verdict, no suspect. No justice written into any record. But Greenwood still received a judgment, just not from a courtroom. It took 9 hours for the town to learn that some boundaries were no longer drawn by law. On the morning of July 19, 1946, 4 trash bags sat in front of a social club like an unsigned notice you can erase the powerless, but not those connected to real reach. This file doesn't ask you to excuse violence. It asks you to confront how power actually works when the law steps aside and why silence can be more decisive than any sentence. If you want to keep opening cases, History Prefers to Leave Buried, subscribe to the channel. These stories don't come with clean endings, but they explain why order sometimes returns without explanation. And tell us this: if you lived in Greenwood that morning, would you feel safer or more afraid?